When I first set foot in a Unitarian Universalist church and began worshiping there, I assumed that that's what was going on in every Unitarian Universalist church. I could hardly be blamed. I grew up in a much more liturgical tradition. I grew up Jewish, and we followed a Siddur, a prayer book. And I could go to my grandparents' Orthodox synagogue or the conservative synagogue that I went to, and there were slight differences, but the prayers were the same, the order was the same, everything was familiar. And it didn't occur to me that in other faith traditions, it might not be like that. So I was amazed to discover, amazed, I tell you, when I visited another UU church, that they did not follow exactly the same order of service that my home congregation followed every Sunday. Amazed that they did different things. How could that be? Well, it's because we are congregational in nature, and we are bottom up, and we don't have a prescribed order of worship that we must follow. We choose for ourselves, and we are an association of congregations, as our second reading just told us. And so things can be very different from congregation to congregation. And yet, we do not stand alone. We choose to be an association of congregations together. We choose to be, in the language of the Cambridge platform, in communion with one another. We choose to be on this path together. Because, as it turns out, it's not all about following a specific order of worship. Isn't that interesting? It's not all about what happens in 1 hour on Sunday morning. Now, for some of us, this might be the only contact we have with the church. I hope it's not, but I know that that's true. But it turns out that the church is so much more than what happens on Sunday morning. We come together and we worship together. We take time out of our week to do this, to prepare us for the rest of the week, for who we are and for what we will do to do the work of the church in the world. And we have chosen to do this work as Unitarian Universalists. And as Unitarian Universalists, we are in communion, in association with one another. We are in covenant with one another. That's what our UUA covenant is. Our 7 principles and 6 sources of faith, and that ever important paragraph at the very end that we almost never talk about. And I know we did a lot of this last year. We did a whole series on the 7 principles and the 6 sources of faith and the whole covenant. But this paragraph at the end: grateful for the religious pluralism which enriches and ennobles our faith, we are inspired to deepen our understanding and expand our vision. As free congregations, we enter into this covenant, promising to one another our mutual trust and support. As free congregations, we enter into this covenant, promising to one another our mutual trust and support. Now, if you have a hymnal at home, if you have your own singing the Living Tradition hymnal at home, you can find that right in the front of your hymnal. It has the principles and purposes. That's our congregational, that's not our congregation's covenant, that's our associational covenant that congregations make with one another. We have covenanted our mutual trust and support with one another. Wow. But do we really live up to that? How do we do that? And what does it mean? Well, at our best, it means that we do things like joining in with Side with Love campaigns like You, the Vote, and other important social justice work that we can do, and we can do so much better when we join together to do it, where we might lobby our legislators or do writing campaigns and phoning campaigns, or sometimes we might go to a rally together and where we might be wearing those yellow shirts, the Side with Love shirts, and showing people what we believe in. It might mean that we give financial support to one another. This congregation has been a recipient of a Chalice Lighters grant in the past, and we might continue to give Chalice Lighter grants, be a part of that. And you might be participating as a Chalice Lighter, or we might participate in Faithify, which is a crowdsourcing, a UU crowdfunding campaign in which we support one another. Congregations support each other. When I say congregations, a congregation could contribute, but usually individuals do. But that's a way that we support each other in the work. And it means that we show up for General Assembly and we do the work of our association, and also that we do regional things, that we support the Central East region. We're part of the Central East region. And it means that we also receive things from the Central East region and from the larger UUA. There are trainings available, and some of you I know have taken trainings from the Central East region. And on a smaller scale, we've been doing a lot with other congregations during the pandemic, have we not? It means that sometimes we join together to worship together, to have virtual field trips. Just last week, we had 2 visiting congregations joining us for worship. And we've visited other congregations for virtual worship. Sometimes it means that that we support each other by staff helping each other out during leave, or at other times by covering for each other. And more, it means that congregations are teaming up to employ people, to employ staff, so that one congregation might employ a director of religious education, or a couple of congregations, 2 or 3 congregations might join together to employ one director of religious education who would serve multiple congregations, or one membership coordinator who would serve multiple congregations. More and more, that's becoming a thing. And sometimes congregations are intentionally teaming up to do other work together. They're becoming yoked in different ways. But we're not always at our best, are we? We're not always. You let me know if you think you have always only ever been at your best. Feel free to raise your hand. But I can tell you I am not always only at my best. I have definitely been at my worst at times. And it's true for us. You know, I can remember going to visit my mother where she lived in North Carolina, and there would be a Baptist church on every other street corner, and some of them pop up because they had a big fight, and the people who left would go and form the church across the street. And we had a big dust up in the UUA a few years ago that somebody described as a good old Baptist church fight. And I'm not putting the Baptists down in any way. This is not meant. This would happen in many other denominations too. The Baptists also have congregational polity, so it's easier for them to do that. It's not so easy for, say, Episcopalians or Presbyterians to just leave and start a church across the street. But we've been known to do that sort of thing too, where instead of holding ourselves mutually accountable, people get angry and leave and form another congregation a little bit down the road. And that isn't being our best. That isn't promising to, that isn't giving one another our mutual trust and support, is it? I mean, sometimes when everything else has failed, leaving is the only thing that people can do for help. But sometimes it's a failure. So how can we be more cognizant of our covenant with all the other congregations? How can we hold ourselves how can we hold ourselves accountable to the covenant, and how can we be mutually accountable to it? What is our duty to ourselves and to the other congregations? Well, I don't have all the answers. I'll tell you that's a question that's been kicking around for a long time. But if we go back to the Cambridge platform tells us that it is the duty of churches to keep an eye on one another. What would that look like? I invite you to pay attention to the other churches that are out there. I invite you to get to know who our nearest UU neighbors are. Now, it happens that physically the closest UU church to us is in New Jersey in Hunterdon County. And there's a congregation in the Poconos, and there's Thomas Paine, they were with us last week, and Reading was with us last week. That's in Reading. And right? There are congregations that aren't too far away. And I encourage you to get to know what's going on with the Central East region and with the wider UUA. We don't have the benefit of being in a big urban area with a lot of UU churches right around us where we can always be involved in doing things with folks. But in this virtual age where it's so easy to do things online, I do encourage you to look at what's available from the Central East region. Maybe you want to take a training. Maybe you want to get to know something a little more. I do encourage you to attend General Assembly. If you can't attend in person, you can attend online. I do encourage you to get to know Unitarian Universalism beyond our walls, beyond our virtual walls. There's another UU church out there, about 1,000 actually. And we can do so much together. What would you like to accomplish? What do you think we could do together? How can we be a stronger Unitarian Universalist association together? What do we have to contribute? How will we get the snow cleared? How will we build the beloved community together? I know we can do this together. I know our future is bright. I'd love to hear your ideas. Namaste.